discriminating against, harassing and prosecuting national and religious minorities and silencing any opposition, human rights groups, human rights defenders and journalists critical to the government. And then we saw nurturing the ideology of BJP, PM Modi and his Home Minister have introduced Citizenship Amendment Act on 10th December 2019, announcing citizenship to illegal immigrants of 6 minorities, including Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Parsis, Jains, Buddhists, but not to Muslims and Tamils, etc., and not to Rohingya Muslims as well. As per the amendment, India will grant citizenship to these 6 minorities came to India before 31st December 2014 from 3 neighboring countries, majority of countries, Muslim majority countries like Bangladesh, Afghanistan and Pakistan on religious ground. Before CAA, BJP had prepared National Register of Citizens in August, asking citizens to show their documents of identity and citizenship. This move alone made 1.9 million people illegal immigrants and stateless. NRC was to persecute Muslims and some of other minorities. As Home Minister Ahmad on record said, no documents are required from other minorities except Muslims, failing both in requirements of CAA and NRC. 1,000 poor are sent in detention centers which lack even basic necessities. And BJP leaders order, this all episode has triggered a wide protest in India and worldwide as well. Then we see like thousands of women and students participated in demonstration, unlike 70 years history of India. BJP leaders order police and extremists to wipe out the demonstrator by force. Hundreds of protesters, including students, activists, political activists, and commoners beaten up, tortured, shot fired, and imprisoned have been charged with sedition law. Then communal violence erupted against Muslims, killed at least 80 people, and 250 injured. Mosque, houses, and properties of Muslims vandalized, women, children trashed. And then, like we have also witnessed some international response as well. Mitchell Bachelet, UN Commissioner of Human Rights, has showed grave concerns over police inaction during the communal violence. And then she came to said that there are grave human rights violations in India. And then she filed an intervention application in Supreme Court of India against CAA, declaring discriminatory and human rights violation. Then we see like EU and UN both are also condemning this this act, which was unconstitutional and discriminatory in nature. And we have saw same sort of human rights violation after 5th August in Kashmir as well. When India has revoked Article 370, it was some sort of a constitutional provision which granted a limited autonomy to the only Muslim majority state in India, we can say, because they have abolished the special status of independent state. So we can say that minorities, people are living there, can be considered minorities against Hindus, like it is like India is a big country. In the lead up to the movement, India sent thousands of additional troops to the already world most militarized region, imposed a crippling curfew, shut down telecommunications and internet, and arrested political leaders and thousands of protesters. Curfew still continues after 1 year. Even amid corona, in curfew, basic needs and rights were denied to Kashmiris, including severely ill patients, died as couldn't reach to the hospitals. Altogether, there have been more than 1,000 protests since August 5th, killed more than 200 innocent Kashmiris, 8 women raped, and 14,000 sent to jail, including children and women. And then international community has again showed their grave concerns over human rights violations in Kashmir. Before we start some sort of formal discussion, I want to show you the report that what is Citizenship Amendment Act is and future of minorities India, how international community sees it. So let me show you a report. We are joined by a very distinguished guest today, Mr. Bernhard ZIMNIOK. He's serving MEP member of European Parliament, very vocal voice against human rights violations. Lord Nazir Ahmad, he's serving member of House of Lords and renowned voice against human rights violations. Mr. Phil Bennion, he's from UK, he's also joining us. He's former member of European Parliament and he's also internationally renowned on human rights. And we'll be also joined by Scott Ainslie. Mr. Scott is former MEP and he's a known vocalist on human rights across the globe. Ms. Danielle Caron, she is former member of Parliament of Brussels and she is also graced us to join. Mr. Shaffaq Muhammad. He's former MAP, and he was also mover of resolution on Indian Citizenship Amendment Act, European Union Parliament as well. So I would start with Mr. Phil Bennion. Phil Bennion, CAA is a discriminatory law and against the international obligations, including UN Charter. But BJP and PM Modi seem unfettered, unmoved. Stripping citizenship is a big and prime crime on the face of humanity. How do you see such grave human rights violation?
Well, technically, in any case, because it's discriminatory, it as you've already pointed out in your presentation earlier, it actually contravenes the Indian constitution, which is secular, and it is against human rights to actually pass laws which discriminate against any particular religion or race. So this is something that is frowned upon at the United Nations level. It's certainly frowned upon by the European Parliament, and I hope by the British government. So it is technically in whatever you say, by discriminating and making a different approach to one religion as against others, this is a law that should be struck down. Now, I made my final speech in the European Parliament on the Citizens Amendment Act, but particularly on how it can be used in concert with the new registration requirements. The problem with the new registration requirements is they need documents that an awful lot of Indian citizens have not got. Now, if they have not got those documents, then under the Citizens Amendment Act, they can be considered to be illegal immigrants, and thereby fast-tracked, if they're not Muslims, back into the electorate, whereas if they're Muslims, they can be excluded from the electorate. Now, this is what I said in my speech, in that it's the two pieces of legislation together and how they can be used, which is the most dangerous thing.
All right. You are saying that excluding Muslims is very discriminatory and unconstitutional, and it is against the international obligations committed by India.
Yes.
Thank you. And we'll be moving towards Mr. Bernard. India's Citizenship Amendment Act can trigger the largest statelessness crisis in the world. European Union has also stressed upon to repeal the CAA. Why didn't Mr. Modi repeal the act amid international pressure? Can't international communities stress more to the India to obey its constitutional and international obligations?
Well, Mr. Bennion was technically speaking right, but I think, can you hear me? Because
I can hear you.
Okay. The thing is, that we have to see the things beside any technical evaluation. I think this is a main problem between Pakistan and India. And if we go from the distance, and it looks maybe a little bit cold-blooded, because I have been for 4 years in the region, I have been posted as a diplomat, and I crossed many times the border at both sides, from Kashmir and India and Pakistan. I know quite well a region. So for me, is the picture not a black and white one. For me, it's a gray one. The thing is, and the main issue is, we have to bring back both parties on the table. Then we can solve all the remaining issues around. If this is Kashmir or is it the Amendment Act or whatever. This is not a thing from outside, because we harden a situation. We give them more, let's say, like a concrete, you know. We have to ease them, like in a situation like Musharraf, in Musharraf's time happens, you know. If we can reach and get a situation like that, then we can solve all the related problems with this, I think. But this is not the task to solve a problem from European Union. It is the possibility we can offer to bring both parties on the table, to start with baby steps, to negotiate and come closer. Then I think we get a little bit more rest and peace in the area. Therefore, I asked already for a peace initiative in the end of last year. But unfortunately, the Reds and the Greens, they were against, because they don't have a proposal like that from somebody who is a right wing. I'm really cold-blooded in this field, and I think really this was the problem. See the figures: 180 against 500. So this was voted. This was only an initiative, nothing more, nothing less. This was the problem. Sorry for that.
All right. So you are saying European Union can bring both parties on table, but here, Mr. Bernhard, the issue is grave human rights violation. Like people are being stripped off from citizenship, and they are being made homeless and stateless as well, and they are being put into detention centers. So how international community see this crisis?
Well,
are you asking?
Okay, a short answer. I think, as I mentioned, the area is not black and white. We have also in Pakistan grave human rights violation against the Christians, for example. You know this quite well, I think. So it is all the times very difficult to interfere from outside, from a European area with a certain set of values in a region which have a set of different values. We can only think to calm down a situation and ease a situation, but we cannot solve the situation. You see.
Exactly. Okay, all right. Mr. Scott Ainslie, though India has very bleak and bad record of communal and ethnic violence starting from 1984, wherein 3,006 were killed after PM Indira Gandhi murder. Then we see in 2002, more than 2,000 Muslims were killed on behest of the PM Modi, then CM of Gujarat, then persecution of Christians in 2005, and now recently we saw killing of Muslim again in capital Delhi in February 2020. Dalits are easy victims of lynching too. Prosecution of minorities in last 6 years is touching new heights. How do you see dangerous to tokenize the minorities?
Yeah, I mean, just hearing those statistics read back to me, it's really those are human lives at the end of all of that, and all of that victimization, it's not in the spirit of Asia. It's not in the spirit of the founding ideal of what India, the secular state constitution, represents. And what's really disappointing is that all of the voices that are highlighting these miscarriages of justice, these extreme human rights violations, are being silenced in Indian media. There's been silenced with internet blackouts. We're not allowing the international community to observe objectively. So, I mean, what's really disappointing about this move by Modi and his nationalist rhetoric is that it plays on the climate of fear that has been, fuel has been thrown onto the fire in order to make himself more popular. Now, how disappointing is that? Not only for the people that are losing their lives, but in the spirit of India. It is a great nation. It is one of the world's leading nations. Yet we have a situation where media is fueling the divisiveness, is playing into fear, and we're losing the discriminatory nature that is being fueled by not only the government, by the media. I was the chair of the all-party group to put forward an urgent resolution against the CAA in the European Parliament. Is my last act, and we agreed on a text with all the big groups to say that this was a gross violation of human rights, and to ask them to think again. But the Indian lobby throughout Europe was working overtime, put a lot of pressure on the groups to postpone the vote. and it disappointingly narrowly missed out. Now, I think what was going on there is that India wanted to see the back of the UK MEPs because they knew that we were going to take a stand on this,
Yes.
a very firm stand on this. And then, you know, as Mr. Hartz has said, since the UK MEPs have left, you know, what hope is there? Where in the world is true leadership being shown? You know, we have the rise of nationalism and the rhetoric that they're using to create division in many parts of the world. The European Union at its best was able to show world leadership and take a stand on behalf of minority groups. And I don't know where else that leadership is going to come from in the world. And sadly, because of that, these human rights violations will continue. And that gives me great fear, but also, it gives me great fear for many, many people, but particularly the minority rights of people in India right now. Over 200 million Muslims, particularly, have been singled out and deliberately left out of the CAA.
Great. Mr. Scott Ainslie, you were saying miscarriage of justice is very rampant and media is gagged there. And then we see climate of fear is at large everywhere to seen. And the Indian lobbies pressurize the people not to move against them and not to move against their interests as well. And then you say, then you said, nationalistic government is nowhere to seen in the world, but we see in India, and it is very unfortunate. And you also urge EU leadership to stand up against this discriminatory thing, and it is against the international charters as well. Ms. Caron, yesterday we have seen 3 Bangladeshi nationals, alleged cattle smugglers, lynched in Assam, lynched based on religion, vandalizing the religious places and house, urging followers to rape women, tokenize the minorities are terrible violations of human rights. Minorities don't see themselves safe under a drill of Hindutva regime in New India. Who will protect the minorities in New India and India of PM Narendra Modi?
Yes, I'm also a little disappointed. I've been deputy during 20 years, and we had a resolution in, yes, it's all right? Yeah, in a resolution also in the Brussels Parliament to have a sort of bridge also for democracy. And we are so proud in Europe that we wanted to show it off as a model of the rest of the world. Minority and also misogyny, racism, and so on. The minority, for example, for the women, women is not a minority, but they suffered a lot in this region, not only in this region, but a lot in the world. But here it's very difficult to have for the local population, it's very difficult, and it's not normal that the minority in Pakistan, India, it's not possible to have the same rights than not in all the countries, but in Africa or in Europe and so on. And I think that the European Commission and also all the parliament, like in Belgium, it's possible perhaps to do something. It's difficult to control the violence, and also that's a problem that the borders are not open. Is it not possible to open the borders, for example, in Kashmir and also in Pakistan? I think it's better if we know the people also better, not to have a sort of bridge. The country is so beautiful, country and regions like Pakistan and India. I think it's difficult, and I am very disappointed that we try to do something to know better India and Pakistan
But
here in Europe.
Ms. Caron, don't you see a very extremist and fascist government in India, and we have seen and we have witnessed grave human rights violations in India in recent years? Don't you think it is dangerous for the world as well?
Yes, there is courageous people here in Belgium, in Europe, and also there. But it's difficult to it's difficult to have more negotiation, to control of access of to water, to have less persecuted people. And if you haven't democracy, it is very difficult for the people to live normally and to have also less poor people.
Got it. Thank you. Lord Nazir Ahmad Sahab, sorry for coming late to you, because I wanted to give chance to other guests. You are very distinguished guest and we really own you. As Supreme Court has denied issuing a stay order in India, being connivance with BJP. Here comes the international community's obligation to ensure basic rights of the people, where institutions are important and marionettes to the regime. You see, BJP is influencing state institutions to toe the lines. This worsens the problem manifold. UN Human Rights Commissioner has filed a petition, intervention appeal as well, but it did not work again and did not get any verdict on that. Don't you think India's justice system is failed miserably to dispense justice to its own citizens, to its own people?
Thank you very much. One of our colleagues earlier on said that India is a great country. If I can just correct and say India was a great country, it was a secular democracy, largest democracy in the world. Sadly, with the Hindutva fascist government of RSS BJP, and I just want to remind everyone, you know, what RSS stands for and how they're influenced by the Nazis and the fascists from Second World War. In any case, what they've been doing throughout this last 70 odd years, they were the ones responsible for the murder of Gandhi and many, many other atrocities. They believe in greater India. They want to get rid of some of the countries that got independence from the United Kingdom. So that's one issue. The second one is that in terms of influencing the institutions, actually, these Hindutva fascists have gone in and intimidated the large number of intellectuals, the large number of journalists, the jurists and the judges, and they are very much controlled by the BJP RSS government. Everybody who has analyzed some of their judgments, they are these institutions are very much controlled by, I mean, just look at, you know, everywhere you think that democracies have a free media. In India, media only reports what the BJP RSS government feeds them, and they don't actually deviate from that. They don't actually have, I mean, this was a great media where you have good reporters and good sources where they can give you reports. They dare not do that, because if you remember right earlier on, a couple of years ago, when the ink and the shoe throwing campaign started in India, where they could walk into the offices, throw ink at these reporters or even lawyers and many secular people. So there is a culture of intimidation, culture of fear, and that also includes judiciary. A lot of people don't like to say these things because it's not right for the European parliamentarians to interfere in the internal affairs. Just like our second colleague speaker who was saying that, you know, it would be good if you could get India and Pakistan to sit down and start some dialogue. Pakistan has been offering to sit down with India. They just reject Pakistan on every occasion. In fact, there is a huge anti-campaign against Imran Khan because he was seen as appeasing the right-wing fascists in Delhi, and he was seen as though he was offering peace all the time, and he was being rejected, and that's what they have done all the time. So whilst I accept that there are problems in Pakistan and in many developing countries, and let's not forget, all of us, because we're in parliaments in Europe or UK, that there is racism and fascism in our countries too. There are problems of inequality and institutional racism in our countries too. But the very fact that we do have laws and parliaments where we can debate these things in other parts of the world, that might not be possible. So with CAA, with stroke of pen, and I have to, Shahid Metla Sahab, just disagree with you, because the documentary that you showed, you showed us a huge percentage of Hindus in India. Look, Dalits are also Hindus, but they are not equal. You have the Brahmins, you have the RSS Hindutva fascists who are supremists, who are beyond everyone else. So you can't just put everybody in the same category because they don't have the same rights. I mean, you've seen videos this last week where Dalit families, boys, youth, women have been beaten up because they have used the same well for the water, or they've used the same facilities as the elitists. So India is not the same. And I think that hoping that India will improve and India will become that secular democracy again, hoping is not going to do it. I think we need to go a little bit beyond this, and we need to talk about trade and sanctions and political sanctions before you can get Mr. Modi and his government who are very much in control, because most of their support comes from the fact that they can show beating the Muslims and beating Pakistan and beating Bangladesh and beating Nepal and taking on China, which they're doing already. That's a threat to regional peace and also the international peace and security.
Got it, Lord Nazir Saab, you elaborated very well, and from A to Z, thank you so very much. Mr. Shaffaq Muhammad, considering corona pandemic and lockdown made lives of the thousands and millions of people miserable around the world, we have witnessed panic, hassle, unrest, riots and killing, anxiety, and it was direly difficult to bear restrictions for our own health and lives. And then we see the same situation, but forcefully in Kashmir, Kashmir under forced curfew and severely locked down since 1 year now, and every single human rights is being denied there. No right of movement, no medical facility, no freedom of religious obligation, no internet, no coverage of media, etc., etc. You presented a resolution at European Parliament. It has carried also some demands to remove and to finish the human rights violations. Don't you see such a crippling curfew imposed on 12 million people and for more than for 1 year it is very injustice, and it is against to all human rights violation, all human rights.
Yeah, I mean, look, I had a very short period in the European Parliament, but at that, one thing is clear: I see Europe as being a force for good in the world, and I work closely with people like Scott and Phil Bennion to do this, and I'm disappointed that we have a difference of opinion with Bernard. I think we should be very much hands-on. I think, we are the world's biggest market. India wants to have a 120 billion euro trade deal with us. I'm happy to have trade deals, but I also want those countries that, want to sell goods to Germany, Spain, UK at the moment, to actually have a good human rights record. I don't want countries to actually think it's okay to lock down millions of people endlessly because they want to change the constitution. If you want to make some constitutional changes, and look, we've done some of that. We had a referendum in Scotland. We had a referendum to leave the European Union. UK is about to leave. What this country didn't do is internet lockdowns. It didn't lock up the Scottish Nationalist Party because we disagreed with them, because they wanted independence from the United Kingdom. We did none of that. Yeah. And therefore, if that's what's good for us in this country, then why cannot we also say that anyone that wants to work with us has to abide by those rules? And I'm very proud that I was able to get this resolution onto the table, and I'm proud that people like Scott and Phil Bennion supported me, because we put down on paper now our concerns. And when it came to it, yes, there were a group of MEPs, about 100 odd, who did not want to even debate this. And Bernard, you might have voted for that resolution not to debate, but the majority of the MEPs in that place did. And I have to tell you, I was thoroughly disappointed by the behaviour of the Indian government in terms of making threats. So Lord Nazir talks about threats to media. Lord Nazir, they were threatening even the European Union. Bernard, I've still got these text messages that were being sent to individual MEPs that were forwarded to me about the fact that if we were to debate this issue, that Mr. Jaishankar, the foreign minister, would not come on the 17th of February, and it might put the India Trade Summit in doubt. I'm disappointed that some EU parliamentarians feel they can be pushed around by a government that's a neo-fascist. I am very concerned that we need to look at our own European history. And I remember telling my colleagues, why are we sat in this building? Why did this come about? And I tell you why. One of the big reasons why we came together as European Union is because a few hundred miles down the road in a place called Nuremberg, that Bernard will know very well, that another democratically elected government decided to make another group of people stateless. And as I said to my European colleagues, do we now need to repeat that mistake? Because this is what's happening here. This is a democratically elected government, but it's bringing in a mechanism that's going to make millions of people stateless. Mr. Modi, in his speech in Delhi, denied there would even exist as detention centres. When you went to Assam, you actually see all the road signs saying there were detention centres. So there is a trust deficit between what the Prime Minister of India says, both domestically and nationally. And going back to Lord Nazir's point and others about the India-Pakistan issue is bilateral. Bilateral means when someone wants to actually talk to each other. And the situation we have here is that India says this is a bilateral issue to the international community, but then refuses to talk. And by the way, it's never been a bilateral issue because China is involved, as we've seen. And more importantly, people like myself who were born in Kashmir, and Lord Nazir was born not a million miles away from where I was born as well. And therefore, we also have a stake in that. And I would hope that my European Union friends and colleagues, and they still are, would actually stand up for European values. Because if those values are what we want for our people living in United Kingdom, Germany, elsewhere, then we should also demand those. We should not compromise, no matter how big they are. Because otherwise, we're going to become the same category as the Chinese and the Russians, where we don't care about human rights. We just care about international trade. And as far as I'm concerned, Europe is better than that.
Very nicely you elaborated. Mr. Phil Bennion, European Union, along with UN, UK, and human rights organizations demanded and stressed upon India to lift the curfew and restore internet services which are halted till today. But India didn't restore it. Internet is very pertinent, being basic right. But we don't see India implementing and taking some sort of advices from international community. don't you think it is giving not so much weightage to the concerns of UN, EU, human rights organizations, and international obligations? Why so?
Well, I think that we have been going through an age where India is not alone in flaunting the international norms. We've seen what's happened with the Uyghur population in China. I mean, which is probably even worse than we're certainly seeing in Kashmir, and also harks back to what was happening in 1930s Germany. So we have not just that, we have Trump, who has been a cheerleader for the mavericks of the world who ignore international norms. He's been doing it with climate change as well as in other areas. But I actually am optimistic that the tide is turning on this. Suddenly we're finding that a bit of backbone is coming in over the Uyghur situation with China, and I think this is actually good news as far as what might happen with India, because once we start actually being willing to take action against human rights abusers, and if it's in China, then people are going to start thinking, well, why are we actually taking action against China, but we're not taking action against India? Now, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen very, very little appetite for any actions to take place. I think everybody's been thinking that the economy comes first. That's their business if they want to persecute a minority. I just want to sweep it under the carpet. I don't want to think about it. But I think we're seeing now the beginnings of a possibility for change, and this might be reinforced. For instance, if Biden beats Trump in November, and then we start getting a re-establishment of the world order, of what we call the sort of liberal world order, which has been under assault now for years, and it's not Modi has been the main culprit. It's been Xi Jinping, but very often, even though India and China are always at loggerheads and are always battling each other, you actually see them aping each other as well. You see Modi. I think Xi Jinping probably did what he did with the Uyghurs, because he could see that Modi was getting away with it, and then Modi does even worse because he can see Xi Jinping is getting away with it. Now, whereas the rest of the democratic world has been sitting there just hoping that something will change, as Lord Nazir says, just hoping something will change. Now, I think we have got to start being more strident in standing up for our values, and if it means sanctions, it means sanctions. Obviously, you try to negotiate change before you just slap on the sanctions, but if you're not going to get that change, you actually have to take action, because otherwise you're a paper tiger. You're not. You actually have to back up your words with actions when it comes down to it. But I honestly think that things are changing, and remember that things can also change in India, and things are. Modi is yet another one of these despots who's running on only just over a third of the vote. He only got, I think, 37% of the vote. Now, there will be another election in India, and when that election comes, the anti-Modi factions must actually, at least under the table, work together a little bit to make sure that the anti-Modi candidate best placed to win has the best chance of winning, and you don't split the anti-Modi vote too much. So I think, I mean, I know a lot of liberal people in India, people who are Hindus in India, who absolutely are appalled at what their own government is doing. So let's not just be defeatist about this. I think that get some backbone in the Western democracies to follow their words with actions, and let's help those in India who are on our side to actually do the best they can.
Thank you, Mr. Bennion. You are saying Modi will be having great trouble in next election, and it doesn't happen in the Western democracy like it is happening in India right now. Mr. Scott, India and the international media is reporting that amid Corona and lockdown in Kashmir, some 30,000 trained extremists have been sent for persecution and ethnic cleansing of Kashmiris. What do you say? How world should react and step in to stop to this sort of ethnic cleansing is going to happen soon, and it is biggest crisis in the making?
Sorry, the line was a bit blurred. You're talking about Kashmir, are you? The human rights violations in Kashmir? Yes? Okay.
Yes, of course.
What we need is an objective UN peacekeeping force to go in and check up and investigate the human rights watch violations that have been breached. And we need to ensure that we put people in the way to stop these blackouts, these gross violations of human rights, the abuse of power and the army that is occurring in Kashmir, and we must do that urgently. When I was representing London constituency as an MEP, I was receiving many emails from the Kashmiri diaspora saying, I have not been able to get a hold of my family for months now. I'm worried about them. I'm worried about this COVID crisis. They are being victimized. They're being, and so the UN and the EU must act. We need these multilateral nations to apply all the pressure on India, and we need that international leadership to be shown. But it needs to be backed up with concrete action and with people on the ground to ensure that these people are safeguarded within international human rights law. I mean, what we've seen, just to come back to India for a moment, is the use of the extended use of police powers, the Section 144 Criminal Procedure Code, to disperse large crowds. Now, we've had that in London. The police overreached the powers. We took the police to court, and the courts found that actually the police acted beyond their powers to disperse crowds. This was against the constitutional right of the freedom of assembly. And it is incumbent upon lawmakers within nations and on the international stage to ensure that we uphold the rule of law and that we do not allow the police to abuse any interpretation of powers or by nationalistic governments who are fueling the fire. But we must act immediately on Kashmir. It was immediate way back, and it's still immediate now. We do have to stand up for the people of Kashmir people there, but also the families that are desperate for news on how their families are doing, and they've had internet blackouts, phone blackouts. This is a violation of human rights, and it must be addressed by the international community urgently.
Urgently. Scott, you have commented really well. You are saying that international community should look after Kashmir issues, and especially blockage of communication and media is not allowed there. And you are also urging international community to stand up by Kashmiris because they are suffering a lot. And you are getting enormous emails that Kashmiris are being tortured, being victimized for so many reasons, and they should be, and their rights should be guarded through international laws exist according to international practices. I would move towards Mr. Bernhard. Mr. Bernhard, we have recently found that Office of Human Commissioner and Human Rights Commission in Geneva found Indian security forces have flashed to wipe out young generation. And it has also found that Indian security forces often use excessive force and human abuses. And this dilemma is fortified because funerals and dead bodies are being denied to their heirs, and dead bodies are not handed over to their heirs, and they are being buried at far-flung areas and quietly as well. How do you see such grave human violation?
As I mentioned before, we as Europeans, first of all, I have to make a remark before, we are teethless tiger. We have no political power, we have no power at all. So don't think we can do anything, first of all. Second one, I am against every transportation of our so-called values or European values to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world, they build up their own values on their own experience, their own climate, their own history and whatever. So this is a kind of colonialism. If we start to say Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, how to rule their own country, this is an issue of their countries, first of all. In the case we transport our values, so we had to ask Pakistan, for example, why Mr. Imran Khan is praising Osama bin Laden. I don't do it. It's your job, it's your country. We have to address it to China. What about the Uyghurs? I'm not interfere in this case. And we are not in the shape to do anything, very frankly speaking.
You can't transport your own values.
Sanctions are not working at all. Give me one country, one sanction which were working. See Russia, see whatever Iran, it's never working. It destroys more than it heals. That's my opinion. Therefore, I don't make any comment on any violation, on a single violation. I even don't do it in Pakistan or in China.
Got it. Ms. Caron, we owe something to our children. We have recently witnessed a very grave picture of a 3-year-old toddler sitting on dead body on his grandfather's and waiting for another bullet to be killed. And it was really scary, and it went viral on social media. And we have seen other big sort of human rights violation when we have witnessed that Hiba Nisar, who was a 19-year-old baby, and she had been fired pellet and she has lost sight as well. Didn't the world owe something to its own children, to innocent children?
Yes, you're right. I think that who are treated, it's people, their identity, their rights, and also legitimate aspiration. Magic can seem like a pragmatic response in a world where everything is bent on making your life precarious, like a pandemic and so on. Perhaps the growing sense of environmental, also health catastrophe may have reduced also economic problems, technological society's prestige and also power to intimidate it. I think that perhaps now with this situation, but it's also when we are positive and also enthusiastic to see it's possible to do something else. Perhaps now it presents itself as rational destroys the planetary environment, too much economical power and so on. Perhaps it's possible to do something else. And I think that the aspiration of the people is to life, perhaps not for yes, to live in a very good situation. And perhaps now, like this conference, thank you, Mr. Metla, I think it's very important if you can have more information in the media coverage, also for the people around the world, have to see what is happening in these regions, and also and activities that can introduce to them are very important. And I am very happy that you show this different percentage, different image, and so on. I think it's very important. When we don't know the people, the situation, it's impossible to try to have a good negotiation. And I think also we have to improve the situation. That is our obligation, like a human woman, a human man, to do something, and that is impossible to do nothing.
Thank you, Caron. Mr. Shaffaq Muhammad, a UN Commission on Human Rights has also called for setting up a commission of inquiry to conduct a comprehensive, independent international investigations into the allegations of human rights violation abuses in Kashmir. It has released a 49-page report on alleged excesses by security forces in the region. Media is also not allowed to enter and report any gruesome incident in Kashmir. Don't you think that a commission of inquiry should be established to probe the human rights violation and abuses in the Kashmir?
Absolutely. Listen, there's been two reports. There's one in 2018 and there's one last year, 8th of July. I accept every word of those reports, and those reports are critical very much of India, but also to some extent Pakistan. And I stand by the findings for both sides. I welcome the UN and Amnesty International to visit both sides of the line of control. And I made that very clear in my conversations with the Pakistan ambassador in Brussels, but also the foreign minister when he visited me, and Phil Bennion actually met with him here. And that's one of the things we instilled upon him. Unfortunately, the Indian ambassador, when he came to Brussels, decided to sidestep anyone that was remotely critical. I don't know whether Bernard had an opportunity to meet with him when he came here twice. I don't know whether Bernard was on the so-called fact-finding mission of MEPs that went. I mean, yes. I'll be honest with you, Bernard. It was very interesting how they selected those MEPs. You would have thought the only Kashmiri. You would have thought, Bernard, the only Kashmiri ever to be elected into the European Parliament might have been asked to go and visit Kashmir. But I have to tell you, Bernard, myself, I doubt Phil Bennion and I doubt Scott would ever even asked. And I have to say that, you know, the Indian government has to be held to account, just to the Chinese. And Bernard did talk about, well, sanctions don't work. I can tell you, Bernard, sanctions do work because these governments kick back at you. And if sanctions didn't work, we wouldn't have seen South Africa. And I understand where you come from, Bernard. You are very hands-off. You don't want to interfere in other people's businesses. But you know what? I'm not there to implant European values on people, but some things are basic across the world. One is a right to life, a right to freedom of expression. They're not just European values, they're universal values. You know, I'm saying that those values we should stand up for no matter where they are. And you know what? I'm with you, Bernard, when it comes to the persecution of Christians. Every time I go to Pakistan, I make a point of visiting the Christian community. And in 2017, I actually spent time with the Christian community at Christmas Day and actually supporting them. And I make a point of actually saying to my Pakistani colleagues that if you want to seek justice for the Kashmiris, then you also have to get your house in order to actually make sure that you are better than what you're criticizing the Indians for. So my message via you, Mr. Shahid, to the listeners in Pakistan is that you live up to your founding fathers' ideology. The white section of that flag in Pakistan symbolizes the rights for the minorities, whether they're Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, and whoever else there is. And if you stand up for their rights, then you have a much better platform to critique anyone, whether it's China with its mistreatment of the Uyghurs or the Hong Kong situation, or whether it's India's dealings with its minorities. And I have to say, the issues aren't just about Muslims in India. There are issues where Christians have also been persecuted. Sometimes Christians are so fearful that they have to put the saffron cloth outside their house and say, we're now Hindus again. And I say, look, we live in the Western society, and where we allow people to practice their faith. And like I said, why should it be that my family can live in peace in the United Kingdom, live their life the way they want, go about their religious duties the way they want? If that's good enough for me, and it's good enough for Bernard and you and your family in Germany, then why should it not be good enough for people in Kashmir? And it needs political leaders, in my opinion, to stand up for their values and say, hey, my name's Shaffaq Muhammad, and I value human rights, and I will challenge anyone. And what that has led to is a lot of mudslinging and that intolerance that governments, and it wasn't just us always picking on India, by the way, Bernard. Phil Bennion, who was our kind of foreign affairs, but more importantly, human rights person for Renew Europe, were constantly challenging the rights of General Sisi in Egypt, the Ukrainians in terms of their freedom of press, etc., attacking journalists. You know, so across the board, I think Europe should be a beacon of light to champion these things. And I think sanctions will work. Because if they didn't work, like I said earlier, the kickback that we got from governments, and this issue that we've had in America at the moment, Black Lives Matter. It's not just an American issue. Because as far as I'm concerned, every life matters, and Kashmiri lives matter as much. Going back to the point that Mr. Shahid made, it was absolutely horrendous to see the body of the grandfather on the floor with a 3-year-old toddler. If that doesn't move any human being, then I need to say to them, I question your morals, because that should never happen. And India will never change unless people from outside start putting pressure on, because at the moment, the media has been totally sidelined. Anyone that's remotely independent, the Modi government and its henchmen will come down and shoot you down. They will
Mr. Shaffaq, you have raised very important points. You are very much right that safeguarding minorities, it's an international practice. It is not some sort of transporting your values to some other region. You are very much right, and you are very much right when you say that India has to be held accountable in terms of human rights violations, and the international community should take note of it. And I'll move to Mr. Phil Bennion for final comments and brief as well. Mr. Phil Bennion, don't you think that India is sabotaging every single international obligation and commitment, and at that same time trade deal between EU and India would be a bad idea?
Well, I think that it's always a bad idea to further trade deals when you have these issues outstanding. I'm very much an advocate of ethical foreign policy. Now, it may be that the British government is now waking up to this. Mr. Raab has suggested individual sanctions for the British government. Whether this is going to actually gel, I don't know. So I think, yeah, you don't stop all negotiations. You basically use your trade power to try and get an improvement in the lives of the people where you're offering the trade deal, because the trade deal will help them in itself. It will help because it will bring prosperity. But also, if we can actually bring some improvement in human rights along with it, I think we should actually take that opportunity. So, yeah, I'm a little bit hands-off, like our German colleague, but I also agree entirely with what Shaffaq said about these values, these particular values being universal values, and we have to stand up for them.
Yeah, we have to follow the universal values which are based on human rights, of course, and UN Charter, EU Charter, and some other human rights organizations charters endorses the same thing. Thank you so very much, Phil Bennion. Thank you so very much, Bernard ZIMNIOK, Lord Nazir Ahmad Saab, Scott Ainslie, Miss Daniel Caron. Thank you so very much. And Mr. Shaffaq Muhammad, thank you so very much for giving us your precious time. And you have elaborated and raised the human rights violations in India. And you have urged the international community to look after this matter before it went very crucial and gruesome, that it cannot be reversed, and the people are being stripped of their citizenship in India. So there is moral duty of world and other human rights organizations, including EU and UN, to persuade Indian government to repeal the Citizenship Amendment Act and to secure the future of minorities there. And minorities should be given their rights according to Indian Constitution as well as international charters, international human rights charters as well. Thank you so very much once again, and we'll be seeing you soon again, inshallah. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Bernard. Phil, Scott.
Take care too.
Take care.
Take care,
Yes.
guys.
Nice to see you, Scott.
Take care for
See ya.
Bernard, thank you so very much. I'm really thankful to you.
I'm all the time the ugly guy.
Hey,
Shaffaq Muhammad, thank you so very much.
That's my
Shaffaq
job.
Sahab, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
bye.
Ms. Caron, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bennion, thank you so very much for your time. We'll be seeing
Pleasure.
you soon, inshallah.